Prime Minister, am I correct that you have top-level security clearance in government by virtue of your office?
Yes.
Do you know which minister is responsible for the communications security establishment, sir?
Yes.
Minister of Defense?
Yes.
Do you know Ms. Zita Astravas, sir?
Yes.
She worked on each of your Liberal Party election campaigns in 2015, 2019, and 2021, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And she worked in your PMO office as your Director of Issues Management until 2017, is that correct?
That sounds right, yes.
Are you aware that she was Chief of Staff to Minister Blair in 2021 in the lead-up to the 2021 election campaign?
Yes, that sounds right.
And the Commissioner has heard that a politically sensitive warrant application that would have empowered CSIS to investigate foreign interference languished on Ms. Astravas's desk for approximately 54 days in the lead-up to the 2021 election. Are you aware of that fact?
I believe there are questions about the dates involved.
Does that mean that you disagree with the overall time period of 54 days?
Yes.
Okay. And how long, in your understanding?
My understanding, it was a number of days before it was a number of days within those 54 days before it ever got near Ms. Astravas's desk.
Okay.
But again, these are things that I have learned over the course of the various testimonies over these past days, not anything I was aware of at the time.
Okay, have you heard the figure 54 days at all in connection with these proceedings?
I've heard that you used it yesterday.
Okay, and if that time period is correct, 54 days, have you learned at all, or do you have any understanding as to whether that length of time for the processing of a CSIS application for minister approval for a warrant is ordinary, out of the ordinary, extraordinarily out of the ordinary? Have you formed any view on that?
Because I have, as Prime Minister, absolutely no involvement in the process whereby CSIS is granted warrants, I have no frame to conclude on that. What I can lean on is, I believe the Director of CSIS raised that there was no flags about the timelines involved.
Okay. Mr. Blair remains in Cabinet today, sir?
Yes.
Okay. And he serves as the Minister of National Defence today, doesn't he?
Yes.
Okay. Just give me a second. And has Minister Blair or anyone in his office at the time that he was Minister for Public Safety faced any consequences for the fact that that warrant application we've come to know did languish in that office for what I'm going to suggest to you is a period of 54 days?
Like I said, the Director of CSIS himself testified that he had no issues with the timelines involved, and I can certainly say that I continue to have full confidence in everyone involved.
Okay. I want to switch subjects. You leveled some criticism and professed bewilderment at the leader of the CPC this morning not agreeing to receive a security clearance. Is that correct?
Yes.
Am I correct, sir, that Mr. Poilievre has said that the reason he does not wish to receive the security clearance is because he does not want to be constrained in terms of the use he can make of the information that he would receive?
I don't believe that was his argument. I believe his argument was that he wouldn't be able to talk about the information he received.
How is that different than what I just said?
Because as leader of a political party, you have many, many tools at your disposal to act on information you receive. You can choose to not sign the nomination of a candidate who is under a cloud of suspicion. You can choose to not elevate them to a critic's position. You can choose to not promise to make them a minister one day. You can you can choose which committees they sit on. A leader of a party has many tools that they can use that are not requiring him to speak publicly about his knowledge. The leader of a party has quite a bit of power over what happens within that party, and that's why the ultimate decision maker in a political party should always be the leader.
Are you aware that there are other security-cleared individuals within the CPC that can and do receive regular security briefings?
I think you're speaking of Ian Todd, the Chief of Staff.
Among others, yes.
I can't help but imagining how people would react if I sort of sat back and said, well, no, Katie Telford got cleared on this information. She made a determination about who could run for me or not, and I don't need to worry about that sort of stuff. Canadians didn't elect, or Conservative Party members didn't select Mr. Todd to make decisions about who could run for the Conservative Party of Canada. They expect Mr. Poilievre to take those decisions, but he has decided that he doesn't want to take those decisions.
Sir, just over the lunch break, and you didn't mention Mr. Todd at all in the bombshell disclosure that you made today, but just over the lunch break, in light of that, in response to your news this morning that you were aware of a number of CPC parliamentarians and former parliamentarians that are at risk of being compromised by foreign interference, Mr. Todd has advised that he has received a number of top secret briefings from the security establishment, and in none of these briefings has the name of any Conservative parliamentarian or candidate, past or present, been brought to the attention of Mr. Todd. Why is that?
You'd have to ask CSIS for that, but my supposition is that Mr. Todd is not the one who is responsible for determining what candidates can run or not for the Conservative Party of Canada, that it would be the leader. And much of the information that is handed out to various individuals with security clearances is determined on their need-to-know basis.
You indicated today, as I indicated earlier, in a very public forum and in a very public manner, your knowledge of the names of CPC parliamentarians and the risk that they risk being compromised by foreign interference. Am I correct, sir, that one way that you could arrange for those threats to be mitigated is through the use of threat reduction measures under Section 12.1 of the CSIS Act?
Threat reduction measures are tools that CSIS has used regularly in many cases regarding different parliamentarians, and it is very possible that a number of those parliamentarians will have had visits from CSIS and either defensive briefings or others to try and mitigate the risks that they are going through. That is different from a leader choosing to willfully remain ignorant of very serious contentions, including by the NSICOP, that the leadership race that elevated him to leader was compromised by foreign interference.
And if the tool of the TRMs were used, you couldn't use the Leader of the Opposition's reluctance to obtain security clearance as an excuse not to provide that information to the CPC. Isn't that correct?
I'm sorry, I'm not following. Can you rephrase the question?
Sure. If someone wanted to get this information, this information about the names of the parliamentarians, for example, because of some imminent threat to the leader of the CPC, TRMs could be used, and in that event, it wouldn't be necessary for the leader of the CPC to obtain security clearance.
No, you're entirely wrong on that. If you were to know that a certain candidate had a high degree of exposure to foreign interference and vulnerability, either witting or unwitting, giving a threat reduction measure to that candidate would not necessarily, and quite frankly, in my experience, highly unlikely to have the candidate spontaneously decide to step down as either a candidate or a member of parliament and not run in the next election. That is a determination that only a leader can make, looking at the vulnerabilities of that candidate, looking at the behavior, and to use the words of the NSIA, potentially poor judgment or inappropriate behavior or untrustworthiness. Those are the kinds of things that only a leader can actually ensure for the team that they're building. And, potentially future ministerial elevations that would then have to run into a security clearance process that would stop them like a brick wall. Knowing that as a leader, as you are hoping to become Prime Minister of this country, would seem to be a very basic bar to hit if you want to take national security seriously.
But the underlying premise of that answer you just gave is that the TRM can only be directed at the person affected and not the leader of the opposition. Isn't that correct? The TRM could be directed to Mr. Poilievre.
The identities of the people involved are themselves classified and available to only those with top secret clearances. So certainly CSIS could go to the leader of the opposition and say, you really have to be careful to instruct all of your MPs to stay away from this country or to be concerned about diplomats from that country or not accept money, or not accept support from these particular diplomats, but the TRM would be unable to identify which of those individuals are in question unless the leader chose to get a security clearance to be able to hear those names. And the fact that the leader does not leaves him in a position of being unable to protect the integrity of his party.
I'm going to suggest that you're wrong on your understanding of the law as to what a TRM can and can't do and who it can be directed to. And I'm going to suggest that the fact that you leveled this accusation earlier today and didn't mention the possibility of a TRM was just for the purpose of grandstanding here today.
On the contrary, threat reduction measures are regularly used to highlight to people potential vulnerabilities. But having watched many having known a number of parliamentarians who went through TRMs, they often come out of TRMs with a general sense of having to be more careful, but specifics are often not given, and there is no guarantee that a TRM to the leader of the party would include the names of the people most at risk or most engaged in potentially problematic activity. And that's why the refusal of the leader to actually access the intelligence on those names is, as I said, bewildering.
Do you agree that often when CSIS or some other security agency shares classified information, the recipient is severely constrained in what he or she can do with that information?
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, your own chief of staff yesterday gave evidence that the recipient of that information would not be able to use that information in any manner. Do you agree with that?
No, I disagree, because the party leader can choose to not allow someone to run for them for any number of reasons, knowing in the back of your mind that this is the real reason, but giving it as an example, I'd actually prefer to have this other person run instead, or you had sketchy business dealings in the past, that means we're not going to go with you. There are all sorts of reasons that do not prove injurious to national security. The leader has a level of power over who runs and what roles they have that doesn't require them to explain themselves. So again, the choice that Mr. Poilievre has made to not avail himself of available information, of readily available information to him if he were to get a security clearance and choose to take national security issues seriously, is unfortunate and shows a lack of seriousness around national security.
And in your salacious testimony earlier today, you mentioned that you're aware of the names of past and present Conservative parliamentarians, former parliamentarians, candidates that are in risk of being compromised by foreign interference. I'd like to ask you, are you aware of the names of any Liberal parliamentarians, former parliamentarians or candidates that are at risk of being compromised by FI?
Yes, and for other parties as well, because I have access to large amounts of information.
Right. You didn't mention those today, right?
We spent an entire session the last time we had a public hearing talking about concerns and named individuals that CSIS and intelligence agencies had within the Liberal Party. Don Valley North comes to mind as a riding. So as I have said many times, there have been actions taken and choices made based on information we got because I had that security clearance. Right. Mr. Polyev has decided not to get that security clearance, so he can't even know how to begin or not to make decisions regarding that information.
Okay, so you've acknowledged Mr. Dong. I want to see if you can help us with, in connection with the warrant application that we were talking about earlier, that I was talking about earlier with you. Can you confirm that either the target of the information or one or more of the individuals on the Van Wienen list were Liberal operatives, sir?
We object to that question on the grounds of national security.
With all due respect, Madam Commissioner, when it suits the Prime Minister's purpose to say that there are Conservatives on a list that he can discuss or he can't discuss, that's fine. But when I ask for confirmation if there are Liberal operatives that are on a list,
I said yes.
My friends, well, I'm asking you in particular on that list there.
But that is
on the warrant or on the Van Wienen list.
The Prime Minister has absolutely no engagement or authorities or involvement in the granting of CSIS warrants. That's a very different thing than concerns about parliamentarians who may have been exposed to foreign influence. And your attempts to conflate them are simply ineffective.
Well, you're attempting to evade the question. I just asked you if any of the names there were Liberal operatives, not whether you could or couldn't do anything about it. That's all I'm asking for confirmation of.
Well, I'm not sure what we're talking about. If we're talking about the warrant, anything that might be related to the warrant, then there's an objection to the question. If we're talking about some other list, then ask the question about the other list.
So it's about the warrant?
It's about the target of the warrant or the people that are named in the Van Wienen list that accompany the warrant.
So the questions are noted. I have no choice, as you know, and we'll see whether the Commission will pursue these questions or not.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister.